We ventured away from Christian evidences last week. We're going to get back into that today. We've discussed a lot of things in detail, and I would like to say this study I'm doing, it's not as detailed or technical as many other studies you might find elsewhere. So if you want to learn more about Christian evidences than what I'm covering in here, I'd be happy to share just this information, whatever else I have with you. I shared some shared as it give you this information so you can study it yourself. And certainly there's plenty of information and material out there to study Christian evidences. Many studies have been done. We're fortunate to live in that's one good thing about the time we live in. We can find a lot of information pretty easily. You can find a lot of wrong information as well, but if you know how to know what the right thing is, then you can certainly find the right information. But before I study today, we've already discussed some different evidences for God, why God exists, different reasons why God exists opposed to the alternative, atheism. There is no God, and man is God. And we just barely got into some things about the flood the other day. Just barely started talking about the flood. Well, the flood of Noah, we read about that flood of Noah in Genesis, starting in Genesis 6, when we read about Noah, that flood of Noah was designed. God sent that flood. It was his purpose in that flood to destroy all of life from the earth. And he did certainly do that. He destroyed all of life. It wasn't a localized flood. It wasn't just in one place where Noah lived. It was a global flood, we often call it. It covered every mountain on the face of the earth until the waters finally receded and Noah landed and his family on those mountains of Ararat. Now, we discussed some different things about the flood last week, but one thing about the flood is the flood, that's a Christian evidence, is what we know Noah's flood that we read about in Genesis. God's account of the flood, the real flood. But you may not know that almost every ancient civilization and ancient pagan religion, I say almost every one, very, very many of them had their own accounts of a global flood, or some of them are localized floods. I haven't researched just how many there are. I did go to the Ark Encounter up in Kentucky a couple of years ago, and they had an entire display there that shows not all of them, just several of them, and it shows those accounts, just brief summaries of those accounts of a flood that these pagan religions came up with, and they're all similar to Noah's flood. They're not Noah's flood, they're all similar to it. And often an atheism, someone who denies God's existence and the Bible be true, would take those accounts of different floods and they would say, well, look, see, your Bible account is no different than all these pagan accounts of these global floods and these localized floods where one righteous man takes different species of animals on his ark with his family. Well, the opposite is true, especially if you read these different accounts. It's very obvious that these pagan accounts of the flood, or a flood, a made-up flood, they're all adapted from the Bible's account. The Bible, it's the other way around. The Bible and the flood account in Genesis was the first one. And all these other accounts came from, or was adapted from the Bible, from people who did not believe the Bible, just as we have today. There's just a couple here mentioned, but the Enuma Elish, from the Gilgamesh epic, tells about a flood. This is probably one of the earliest flood accounts outside the Bible. Again, these are pagan flood accounts, but it's very interesting because here, the Gilgamesh epic, this flood account that it tells us about, it tells us that the gods, the little g gods, they became very angry with mankind. Somewhat similar to the true account. God, I don't know if we could say he was angry, but certainly displeased with mankind and was going to start over. Well, it says that these little g gods became angry with mankind, but notice here we have highlighted why they became angry with mankind. The gods at the noise men were making. So this flood account, this pagan, quote-unquote flood account, says that the gods, little g gods, became angry with mankind because they were too loud, basically, and decided to flood the earth and destroy all of mankind, similar to Noah's flood. Well, where did they get that idea of the global flood? They got that idea from Noah's accounts, from reading from reading the scriptures back then. That's where they got the idea. But notice the stark difference in a pagan idea about the little g gods and our God. These pagan gods, little g gods, were upset because man made too much noise. Our God, the God of the universe, is perfectly righteous. He punished man because of their sin. He started over with Noah because he was righteous. Anything we see that is similar to what God has said, but not what God has said, there may be similarities, but we can always notice the vast difference in other accounts and other things that other people come up with their gods, and even in the religious world today. What do we have? We have a lot of things that are similar to what the Lord has established. We have a lot of churches that are similar to the Lord's church, but that doesn't mean they are the Lord's church in the same light. Whenever there is a truth, something that is true, there's always a counterfeit to that truth. There's a true account of a global flood that happened, and there's plenty of evidence that there was a global flood. I'm going to mention some of that before we close out as well. But since there's a true account, there's also a counterfeit, or many counterfeits. Just like if you have money, you have actual money, real money, that's printed by the government, it's approved. Well, then what is there also? Well, there's counterfeit bills and things such as that. Where there is a true, the truth, there's also counterfeit, always. And we see the same in religion today. There's the truth, and then there's all kinds of counterfeits. And the counterfeit may look very, very similar to the truth. And then the same would be true for these flood accounts. And none of these flood accounts were the first. They got their ideas. In fact, right here, I had the Persians. Whenever the Israelites were taken by the Babylonians, which eventually were absorbed into the Persian Empire, the Persians, when they came into Babylon, they created their own flood account, adapted from the Jews who had the true flood account. That's where they got the idea for that matched their gods and those different things. So for every truth there's going to be a counterfeit, but the counterfeit always implies that there's something true. There's another evidence for God. Why do all these ancient people worship different gods? Why does man still today seek something to worship? And often today it's themselves. That's what atheism is. That's the religion of worshiping yourself, or humanism. We tie to that. We sometimes talk about. Why does man seek to worship something greater than himself? Well, and make up his own gods, his own little g gods. Well, because for every counterfeit, there is the real thing. And the fact that man has always sought to worship a little g god or some sort of god is proof that there is the true God. There is a true God. And we know that it is because we know the Bible to be the inspired word of God. Now, also, so the flood. We're discussing the flood here. Mainly, the flood was a global flood. We've already discussed that. And we see that because we take the Genesis account of the days of creation we've already discussed, and the flood the same way, literal 6 days of creation, not some kind of metaphoric thing where it's each day matches so many years, but each day is 24-hour period. Well, the same is true with the flood. The words we read in the flood account, and especially we're about to look here at Genesis 7, we can take these things literally. These things we read about that happen during the flood are literal, and I'll say that's important for evidence as well. After we read these couple of things. So, Genesis chapter 7, we read about the flood actually taking place, Noah taking these pairs of animals onto the ark. And notice with me here, Genesis 7 and verse 11. Genesis 7 and verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. So the fountains of the great deep. Now there's proof. We have evidence. We know there are great fountains at the bottom of the ocean that release some of them are volcanoes and different things like that. But the fountains of the deep were opened up. They were broken up. This means what it means. They were broken up. They were open. So whenever this flood happened, and the windows of heaven were also opened. Now, Moses, when he wrote this, he didn't have access to go down in the deep in the seas and see these fountains like we do today. But how did he know this? Well, by inspiration of God, just like he knew many other things. And there's plenty of evidences of that throughout the Old Testament as well. But these fountains of the deep, so these fountains that were underwater were broken up, shooting up, gushing up water. And then there's also the windows of heaven. Well, what's that? That's the rain that came down. There is evidence. I don't know if it's definitely true, but it could very well be true that it had never rained at all before the flood happened. You could research that yourself. It makes sense to me that would be the case. But the windows of heaven were open. Now, this water's coming out from underneath and from the top. And we see the next few verses how long the water prevailed on the earth and how long it stayed. And they had to stay in the ark. Here in verse 17. So we saw these fountains broken up and gushing up water. Verse 17, and the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased. So during that time, the waters continue to just increase. These fountains continue to gush out water, and then the heavens opened up, continue to pour this rain, probably or definitely unlike any rain we've ever seen. So the ark was lifted up above the earth. It probably didn't take very long for that to happen. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth. So see that word increased again. They prevailed. They covered everything on the whole face of the earth. This is a catastrophic event. And the ark was upon the face of the waters. Noah and his family safe inside, and the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven. That would be the whole earth. It was not all, means all. That were under the whole heaven were covered. Even these mountains of Ararat that Moses, I might have said Moses in place of Noah several times, but I did, I'm sorry. But Noah and the ark landed on. Verse 20, 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail. So there again, prevail, and the mountains were covered. There in verse 23, all living substance was destroyed. It was destroyed. It was no more. God started over with the earth. And verse 24, again, the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. That's a long time of major flooding all over the world. These fountains all over the world. I don't know how they were spaced out, but everywhere. And then the heavens opened, covering the entire circumference of the earth. That's a lot of water. Now, why is that so important for Christian evidences? Well, all this water at one time, how much damage could that do? How much could that change? Whenever we see a flood just here on Lake Darwin, that's an extremely minute thing compared to even floods we see today. Compared to Katrina, the catastrophe that happened in South Louisiana years ago, or compared to these different things we see around the world today. And look how much it changes things. Look at the devastation it causes. It's a very, very small thing. This is a global flood. Now, evolution would have us believe that the earth is millions of years old. Why? Well, because that's the way they date it. That's the way some of it's circular reasoning. I mentioned that as well if I have time. But some of the reasoning is how they look at the earth and say, oh, it had to take billions of years for all this to happen. We mentioned how that's what an evolutionist, Davis, would tell you how the Grand Canyon was formed. Well, or anything, if you go up to North Arkansas or Buffalo River, you see these big bluffs everywhere. They'd say it took millions of years for that to form, with a little stream starting out and eventually cutting through these rocks and everything. Well, they don't take into account all that no one has ever witnessed evolution. No one's went back millions of years. It doesn't exist, but let's say it does. No one's went back and observed those things. No one besides Noah witnessed the flood, the people who died in the flood, the animals who died in the flood. But what they say takes millions of years to create, it would have taken 40 days, or throughout the entire length of the waters prevailing on the earth, or maybe a few days. I don't know. But all this water coming out at one time, just like a flood can cause damage today, certainly can reshape the whole face of the earth. Can carve out this water coming up from maybe what was once, or definitely what was once oceans, in places like where the Grand Canyon is. These different things we see today, physical structures we see today. That water coming out at one time and coming down from the heavens at one time certainly had the capability to create all these different carvings and different structures and natural things in the earth that we see today, and even maybe push up mountains and different things like that. So we have two things here. I was just talking about the second thing you might have already read down there, catastrophic shaping and scarring. So the flood weathered the earth, certainly, and would make it appear older. The first time I ever heard this about apparent age was actually here at Farmerville. Brother Ron mentioned this in an invitation one day a few years ago, that the earth was created not as an infant, in a sense. God didn't create Adam and Eve as babies, as infants. He created Adam and Eve as grown people, grown human beings, and married them, so that they were grown. Well, the same with the earth. God created the earth. Do you think He just, I don't know exactly how this worked, but did He just put grown trees on the earth? He definitely put animals that were already born. They had to have been for Adam to name all these animals and then to get started. The point is, God created the earth probably already with an apparent age attached to it. So, however, the earth is dated by someone that doesn't believe in God. Certainly could be misled. The idea of how old the earth is misled because the earth could appear older than what it really is. God created the earth in a miracle in 6 days. And it certainly could appear older than what it really is because it's in a mature state. It was fully, he formed it completely there at one time in Genesis 1. Now before the last couple of things we talk about here, I want you to look at these questions. You can ask yourself these things. This is why it's important to talk about these things, Christian evidences, because we live in a world today, and it's been for a couple of generations now, I believe, just accepted widely that the earth is millions of years old, which is, we've already established, an idea of evolution, of atheism, not an idea that comes from God. But you can ask most of your children are grown, but you can still ask them and see what they say. And certainly your grandchildren, ask them these questions, ask them how old the earth is, and see what they say. Now, if they believe the Bible at all, they would say the Bible is a fact, not a myth. But certainly, if you believe that, if the idea that the earth is millions of years old is saying that Genesis is not fully a fact, whether people understand that or not, that's where that idea comes from. Did dinosaurs and man live at the same time? Well, evolution says that they didn't. Dinosaurs lived before man. There were other living things here before man evolved into what we are today. Well, the Bible says otherwise, and next week we might get to look at some of those things. Even the Scriptures seem to attest that, or have examples of maybe dinosaurs living with man. Whether the Scriptures are actually showing that or not, we know that dinosaurs live with man because they were both created on day 6. So when you read your children a storybook about dinosaurs and it says dinosaurs lived millions of years ago before man, you can mark that part out and you can change it. So they lived thousands of years ago with man. Do animals and man have a common ancestor? Well, evolution would say we have common ancestors. Certainly we don't have common ancestors, but we have common something else. We have a common creator or common design sometimes. But that's why there's similarities in animals and in people, which is also an argument for evolution, that there's similarities and that's in different animals. Well, of course there is. God designed us, He designed animals, and He designed us all to function perfectly for what He intended for us to do. I'll talk about this just for a moment before we move on. I meant to bring something up here with me to show you, but I forgot about that. Yeah, well, we'll still discuss this. So fossilization, evolution would say it took millions of years, but there's ample amount of evidence that it doesn't take millions of years for something to fossilize. And there's fossils all over. You can find fossils sometimes in rocks when you go in places not far from here and see where these marine animals had once lived and were fossilized. Well, fossilization doesn't take millions of years. Here's an example of something that was that proved that to be wrong. So the coelacanth, along with other things, were once thought to have lived millions of years ago and been extinct for millions of years. Well, I meant to write down the date. It lives in the 90s. There was coelacanth after it was believed for years and years that it was an extinct animal. Here's a fossil of a coelacanth. It's a fish, type of fish. And after it was believed by most everyone that this thing was extinct and had gone extinct millions of years ago, off the coast of South Africa, I believe it was in the 90s, there was coelacanths found by scuba divers. It's the exact same thing. It's proven to be the exact same thing that was fossilized, that the evolutionists had told everyone took millions of years to, was extinct millions of years ago. And there's one living today. That's what they look like. And they're still living today. So there's many evidences against evolution, just like that. Anything that says, that it proves the earth is millions of years old will eventually turn out to be a hoax, because it is a hoax. It can't be true. Now, there's some other things we'll talk about next week, but we won't get into that right now. But as we close tonight, again, if you want any of this information, I can get it to you. Or want to discuss anything further, we can discuss it. Appreciate y'all's attention. If there's any need tonight, as always, if you need prayers from the congregation, if you need encouragement from anyone, or any need at all, the brethren are here to help you as you respond to God's invitation if there's any need tonight.
There's a